According to the Bible, God commanded Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac as a test of faith, and then burn his body. Now, archaeologists may have discovered proof that human sacrifice may have really happened in ancient Israel. This 6,000-year-old jar,
I see something poking out.
possibly filled with the ancient bones and ashes of a baby.
It's the smallest finger.
If our forensic experts can piece this skeleton together, it may tell us how he died and bring us face to face with a 6,000-year-old child. Excavations of ancient Israel have unearthed an abundance of pottery, remnants of ancient daily life. These vessels had a wide variety of uses, but perhaps its most unusual use was as an urn for infant remains.
פה זה למעשה כד קבורה בערך בין 6,000 שנה. מה שאנחנו יכולים לחפש פה זה עצמות של תינוק. אנחנו רואים שהכד...
To determine if this jar contains a 6,000-year-old baby, archaeologists must send it through a CT scan.
וואו, יפהפייה. איזה גולגולת. פנטסטי. הנה כאן אנחנו רואים את הגולגולת. כאן זה עמוד השדרה, והצלעות הן פה, וכאן זה האגן. אנחנו רואים פה את הטיביה, יש פה עוד טיביה.
נראה לי הירך.
וכאן הרגליים שלה בעצם מקופלות. משוכבת נוחה עוברית. המצב של העצמות הוא קטסטרופלי, אין שום סיכוי לעשות פה שחזור או רפאות. בסוף היום נצטרך פשוט לפרק את הכד הזה ולחפור את השלד החוצה.
Fortunately, all the pieces are here. They just need to be put back together. It's the first step in determining if this child was sacrificed. One of the greatest tales of sacrifice comes from the biblical story of Abraham and Isaac. The book of Genesis tells us that Abraham is God's most loyal follower. In return for his faith, God promises to make Abraham the father of many nations. But when God demands Abraham kill his son, Isaac, it goes against all his spiritual beliefs. Abraham faces an impossible choice. He must sacrifice his beloved son or defy his God. Our possible sacrificial child comes from some of the earliest ancient settlements in the Holy Land of Abraham, at a place called Fetzael. 6,000 years ago, this land was known as Canaan. According to biblical tradition, at the time Canaanites were living here, their tribes paid tributes to many gods with offerings of goats, sheep, and grain, and sometimes children. I'm at the Fetzael excavation with archaeologist Shai Bar.
And during the excavation, we found this very nice dwelling unit.
It was here that Dr. Bar discovered our 6,000-year-old mystery jar.
Now, as we walk this way, we can see that there is a division wall here. In this corner here, we found the remains of a child burial within a jar, within a container. This is a very unique find. I believe that most of the children were not buried inside the house. It could be something like a foundation present. When you build a house, before you put down the floors, then you bury something precious beneath. And then it's for the foundation.
The child's burial under the corner of this house could have been an offering to the foundation of house and family. Even today, the word cornerstone has a strong significance.
If they were buried as a construction offering, then maybe their life had to be stopped, so they could be buried at the time that the house was built. We don't know exactly what happened and why these children were buried beneath the floors of some of the houses, not all of the houses. We don't know.
And does it mean that perhaps these children were special,
Yeah,
specifically?
Yes, maybe they were the first to be born. We don't know.
Given the great value the Canaanites placed on their firstborn, they may have considered these children the most precious gifts for their gods.
Well, we have a primary burial of an infant lying here somewhere. We don't know it yet. We have to excavate the jar.
These remains could be evidence of an ancient sacrifice.
From the CT scan, from the result, there is a youngster, probably up to half a year old. We don't know the gender because a child such young, we can't tell the gender, lying here. Now, the jar was put, when it was interned in the ground, it was put upside down, meaning the rim was the bottom, and the base, which you can see here, the remains of the base, was the upper part. So they put it upside down, put the baby inside, and then sealed it with the base of another jar that served as a lid.
I see something poking out under there. Are those bones?
We can see one bone, but we don't know even if it's the baby's bones or another thing. We have to excavate it.
Only one way to find out.
Yeah, only to dig it and to see if there is something here.
One of the earliest discoveries of infant burial in ceramic vessels occurred 100 years ago. Irish archaeologist Robert McAllister was excavating an ancient temple in Gezer when he uncovered the incredible.
And when he removed the floor of the temple, he found several jars with babies inside. And he was the first one to speculate that those children were sacrificed and put intentionally into the jar. Till today, 100 years later, we still don't know whether those children inside the jars were sacrificed intentionally to local gods or something like that, or whether the jars were served just as some kind of a small coffin for babies.
Since McAllister's first discoveries, experts have unearthed thousands of infant jar burials around the Mediterranean. Many of these vessels contain small token objects, scarabs and metal jewelry. If some of these babies were ritually killed, then these objects may have been talismans of sacrifice. And it appears that something similar has shown up in the CT scan of our Canaanite child.
כאן יכול להיות שזה משהו שנראה לנו כמו חרוז או משהו כזה.
זה לא חלק
זה לא חלק מהשלד, כן.
They found a small object that the city experts say it's made of metal, a tiny 8 millimeters piece of metal, which is supposed to be maybe a bead, something like this.
Where?
In the area of the forehead of the baby. So this might be a metal bead, a copper bead actually. So maybe this metal thing, which was quite rare in that time, was an important offering for these babies. But we don't know if you'll find it. We don't know if the CT scan was right.
So it's possible we'll find some clue buried in this evidence that will help us maybe unravel that mystery.
These remains could provide proof that the infant sacrifice described in the Bible actually occurred. After God commands Abraham to sacrifice Isaac and return him to God, the father and son begin an epic 3-day journey to the summit of Mount Moriah for the ultimate test in faith. Today, the site of the Islamic Dome of the Rock. Under the Golden Dome is a rock from which Muslims believe that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. But this rock is also believed to be the spot where God commanded Abraham to kill and burn his only son. Burning children on a fiery altar was seen as a way of giving them back to the gods. In Leviticus, the Bible refers to this ritual as passing through fire. The team moves to the next phase of their investigation.
We're sifting all the material. We're looking for all the remains that will help us and assist us in making a complete research. This jar is a sealed jar that has everything in it from 6,000 years ago and beyond.
But they're not just searching for fragments of bone.
Even within the, what it looks like a sterile soil, there is still a lot of data. Sometimes you can even tell what was the content of the stomach of the child that was buried inside the jar.
They sift out and ID everything bigger than a grain of sand.
In order to gain as much information as possible, what we need to do is to very carefully pick up every small artifact that you find inside the soil, and as you can see, still keep the rest of the soil for further analysis.
The discovery of charcoal, animal bones, or other organics could help determine whether or not this 6,000-year-old child was ritually sacrificed.
I can see part of the skeletons from here.
Yes, we can see here maybe the fibula and the tibia, and I think here we have a part of a pelvis.
Okay, you have to work very slowly. Be careful.
Here's something nice. Look at this tiny thing. You know what this is? This is the smallest finger, upper part of finger.
Oh my gosh. That's incredible.
A newborn child.
Here I discovered the skull.
You discovered the skull?
Yeah. Here we can see two fragments. And maybe the other parts of the skull are over here.
You can see the remains of the skull.
Yeah.
It's only 2 of 100 tiny skull pieces to be isolated. It's an almost impossible task to reconstruct a skull this broken and fragile.
You so easily could have missed that.
Yes. But then again, we would have gone again on all this material, sieved it again, and looked for other pieces.
But modern forensic computer modeling may be able to bring our Canaanite baby back to life and possibly reveal the secrets behind its death. It was in what would later become known as the Valley of Death, where Abraham and Isaac most likely traveled on their way to Mount Moriah. Here, God would tell Abraham he must sacrifice his son. Though no archaeological evidence of sacrifice has been found here, according to the Bible, the Valley of Hinnom outside Jerusalem was where children were sacrificed on fiery altars.
I always accepted the biblical tales as background of some reality.
Right.
There is a place upon earth where these things happen, and this is the place.
Dr. Barkai is an archaeologist who has spent years excavating these hills, a place that in ancient Israel was synonymous with hell.
So as beautiful as this is, it wasn't always so idyllic, was it? Jeremiah, I believe, referred to the Valley of Hinnom as the Valley of Slaughter.
In fact, it could have been both. It was nice, it had some orchards even then, and then later on in the 8th century BC it became the place of children's sacrifices by the Jerusalemites, and as a result they named the valley Valley of Death, or Valley of Killing. The basic concept of the ancient Near East was that children are not the property of their parents, but the property of the deity. And as humans are pleased to have children, they think that the deity would be pleased to have the children. Of course, if the child belongs to the deity, then God can demand passing the child to his property.
And also the idea is if it pleases the creation, it probably pleases the creator.
Yes, for sure.
Is there any archaeological evidence of child sacrifice in other parts of the world?
Yes, there is. In Sicily, in Sardinia, in North Africa, and also along the Syrian-Lebanese coast. All those places are connected to the Phoenician civilization. The best example was in the city of Carthage.
The Phoenician city of Carthage lies 2,400 kilometers west of here in present-day Tunisia. The Phoenicians were seafaring Canaanite merchants who traded goods as far as Britain. And it seems they brought their Canaanite beliefs here to Carthage. The burnt remains of over 20,000 human babies lie in urns and jars dating to the 1st millennium BC, buried in this ancient cemetery. Archaeologist Dr. Brian Garnond believes that the Phoenicians took part in a violent ritual every spring, burning infants and offering to the sun god Baal Hamon. and burying them beneath these stone markers.
One of the strangest things that we find are the bones of juvenile sheep and goat buried alongside and intermingled with the bones of infants. And not only is it strange that they're intermingled, but it's strange that they're all the same age. The sheep and goat are 0 to 3 months old as well, so that these infants and lambs and kids were all sacrificed at about the same time.
From Israel to North Africa to Crete, archaeologists are uncovering ancient infant jar burials.
Why do you think the Bible spends so much time, dedicates so many passages to referencing child sacrifice?
I think it was because it was so famous. We have real sources that are saying that this is what's being done. The Mesopotamians are doing it, the Egyptians are doing it, here the Canaanites, everybody who's living in the, quote, land of ancient Israel are all talking about child sacrifice. If there's so much literary evidence and you have so many of these jar burials, it stands to reason that there must have been some type of correlation between the two.
You remember I told you about the metal object. It was observed on the CT. This is a tiny piece of flint.
It turns out what looked like a metal bead, perhaps a sacrificial token, is actually a piece of flint. And there are quite a few of them.
What I'm collecting now are small pieces of flint that are found inside the jar.
This flint could have been used to spark the flames of a sacrificial altar.
Did you notice any differences in the type of soil changes in the soil or something like that? It's all the same?
So far, they can't find any traces of charred remains in the jar, making it impossible to determine if the flint was used for a sacrificial fire. With the altar prepped to burn and his knife raised to kill, Abraham is stopped short from sacrificing his son, Isaac. He hears a voice.
God sends a messenger, an angel, and the angel says, "Do not do anything to this child." The context of this text is the end of child sacrifice. In other words, the entire world was sacrificing their children. So we have a father here who is going through the motions of what he sees his culture doing.
So at the time, everybody was doing it. Abraham would have seen all his neighbors sacrificing children.
Exactly. So to me, the test is, would he be able, against all odds, to hear a voice that said, "Go against the flow. Be courageous. Follow another path and save your son." Because human life is of ultimate value.
Some scholars say that the Abraham episode is simply a test of faith, but others argue that it is the Bible's call for an end to child sacrifice.
We have real places in the Bible where they're prohibiting a practice like child sacrifice. And the idea that the Bible has a prohibition against it already tells us that if they know that people are doing it, that's when they're going to prohibit it. Right. So there was something that they found objectionable, but the fact that we have in the Bible from Father Abraham all the way through Jeremiah, a string of people actually doing child sacrifice, that tells us something about how well known, how widespread it was among the Israelites.
Our Canaanite child may well have been given to the gods, but it was long before the Bible's prohibition. And the forensic team could be one step closer to giving sacrifice a face. Technician Vivian Sloan painstakingly assembles the tiny bone fragments in an attempt to reconstruct the baby's skull.
המצב הגולגולת שלנו?
תשמע, עשיתי כמה שאפשר, אבל העצמות פשוט, תראה, נורא קטנות, נורא מתפוררות. ברגע שאתה מפעיל לחץ, זה מתחיל להישבר.
And that's not the only problem.
וגם לא נשארו כל כך הרבה חלקים, אני לא אצליח לעשות גולגולת שלמה.
האפשרות הראשונה זה לקחת את כל החלקים, לסרוק אותם, ובעצם להדפיס אותם בפלסטיק. ואז החלקים יהיו הרבה יותר קשים ולא תהיה לנו בעיה לעבוד איתם. ואם זה לא ילך, האפשרות הנוספת היא לקחת את כל החלקים שסרקנו ולהרכיב באופן וירטואלי בתוך המחשב את הגולגולת. בסדר? אז אל תתייאשי, זה יהיה בסדר. בסוף תהיה גולגולת.
They call in forensic artist Victoria Lywood to conduct a facial reconstruction. She'll sculpt muscle and tissue to bring the baby's face back to life, if they can piece the skull back together.
Okay, this is the baby from the jar. It is probably a child when newborn and 3 months with hundreds of small pieces that we have to put together.
Victoria is most often employed in police investigations when the victim is unidentifiable. But she's never dealt with a missing child case over 6,000 years old.
Just look at the cranial bone, look at their thickness.
It's really not much thicker than a potato chip.
So we cannot actually glue and put the bone together. There is no way to do it. I mean, the contact line is too narrow. The two pieces of bone, when you glue them together, they will never hold on.
No.
So we are going to scan each piece separately.
Oh, right.
And then we will reconstruct the skull in the computer. We'll cast it, send it to you.
Perfect.
For facial reconstruction.
You have all the
Complete
facial
skull.
bones in here, Israel?
We have most of the facial bone. We have most of the cranial bones, as you can see. We don't have all the pieces, but we will have a general idea how this child looked like at the time of his death.
Constructing the face of a baby this young from a few fragments of facial and cranial bones has never been done before. It requires the use of several digital techniques.
הבעיה היא שנאלצנו להחליף את שיטת הסריקה בגלל העובדה שעצמות של גולגולת של תינוקות הן כל כך דקות, כמעט בעובי של קליפת ביצה, שסורק רפואי רגיל לא יכול לטפל בהם, הוא מפקשש בעצם את העצם, אתה מקבל חלקים לא ברורים.
It's a density problem. The CAT scan cannot discern the bone from the rest of the material in the jar. So the forensic team employs a white light scanner, a device designed to measure the geometrical characteristics of an object. The images created by this scanner can then be assembled in the computer.
הוא באמת יסרוק רק את פני השטח של הגולגולת, ואחר כך בעיבוד ממוחשב אנחנו ניתן לזה כל עובי שתרצה ונוח לך לעבוד איתו, ואחרי הדפסה תוכל להמשיך בהדבקה.
These scans will provide the team the pieces they need to virtually piece the baby's skull back together. The team uploads the images from the white light scans to perform the digital reconstruction.
מה שאנחנו רואים פה עכשיו זה את אחד החלקים שסרקנו קודם. אתה רואה פה 12 סריקות שונות שעשינו לחלק הזה. מה שאנחנו נעשה עכשיו זה נגיד לתוכנה למצוא את החיבור המושלם בין כל הסריקות. הוא יודע לזהות על סמך הגיאומטריה, הוא מזהה נתונים גיאומטריים דומים ובעצם מנסה לחבר אותם ביחד.
It's a complex jigsaw puzzle with 6,000-year-old pieces.
זה מדהים היום שבטכנולוגיות כאלו חדשות, אתה יודע, אפשר לפתור כל מיני יחידות של העבר, פשוט לא יאומן.
But reconstructing the baby's skull entirely in a digital 3D environment does give Professor Herskovits concern.
בכל זאת אני רוצה שיהיה לנו איזשהו קנה מידה.
Herskovits wants to compare the model with some real bone.
את הגולגולת שאתה השלמת לה את הצורה בעזרת פלסטלינה.
They scan the partial assembly that Vivian was able to create and perform a digital overlay.
כחול זה הגולגולת הסופית שלנו. אחרי שלקחנו את כל החלקים האלה, הרכבנו אותם ביחד כמו פאזל בצורה וירטואלית.
כן.
ירוק זה המודל שאתה השלמת בעצם.
Although Vivian's model is incomplete, it's enough of a physical rebuild to test the virtual skull for accuracy.
בואו ננסה למצוא נקודות שהן חופפות בגולגולת הזאת ובזאת ולהקדים ביניהם. יש לנו, אני כבר מזהה את זאת.
הנקודה הזאת נקראת למדה.
נשים את הגולגולות אחת על השנייה. בצורה הזאת.
יכול להיות שאנחנו צריכים להרים את זה טיפה. יופי. חפיפה די טובה, לא?
לא, זו חפיפה לא רעה בכלל.
They end up with a perfect skull.
The green one is the actual skull, and the blue one is the virtual skull. And you can see that there is an excellent overlap. אני חושב שאפשר לשלוח את הגולגולת להדפסה, היא מצוינת. עשית עבודה.
This child offered to the gods as a sacrifice? When Abraham is about to sacrifice his son, he suddenly hears a voice. A holy messenger tells him to spare Isaac. And so, he sacrifices a ram instead. And Isaac lives on to become one of the 3 patriarchs of Israel.
And this sanctification of life becomes a cornerstone not just of Judaism, but it's so important to Christianity and later Islam. It takes over the world, doesn't it?
Yes. Now, each one has a different take. You know, Christianity sees this as the sacrifice of Isaac and a prefiguration of the sacrifice of Jesus. Islam sees it as the near sacrifice of Ishmael, Isaac's older half-brother, who becomes the father of the Arab nation and Islam. There are certain foundational values that unite us, and this is one of them. That human life obtains the highest value in our religious tradition and in our hierarchy of values. So there is nothing higher than this.
If our jar baby was given to the gods, it was long before the great value change in religious tradition. And Victoria may be the first to show us the face of a sacrificial child.
I'm going to do a drawing following the skull that I was given by Israel, and my target age on this drawing is 0 or at birth.
She receives the printed skull from Professor Herskovitz, but begins her process with a series of post-mortem sketches.
Now I'm going to be drawing this face. It's going to be relatively short and wide because of this small nasal region here.
When it comes to the jar baby's eyes, Victoria uses the average size of an adult eye.
It's 25 millimeters, and the eyes remain relatively constant throughout life. So this is what gives babies the big-eyed look. And as you can see, the 25 millimeter eyeball takes up most of this child's orbit.
After several hours of sketching and shading,
I'm just finishing off the shading here.
a beautiful child's face starts to come into focus.
This nasal projection, this little spine right here, the direction that it's going helps us determine whether that nose is going to slope down or point up.
In a software design lab in Boston, forensic artist Greg Mahoney recreates our jar baby's face digitally.
So we then take what's called this tug tool, and with this tool I can push and pull the piece so we can see this is kind of what it does.
Using an advanced technology called force feedback, he can actually feel what's inside the computer. He uses his sense of touch to model in the virtual world, just as a sculptor would in the physical.
So we just want to subtly bring it in until we can start seeing the bone pop through and start blending this shape in with the bones that are surrounding that area where the bone has gone missing.
Once he builds features like the baby's eyeballs, Greg can place and remove them with the touch of a key. It's a little different for Victoria.
I'm using this sketch that I've done as the reference for the face that I want to complete.
She must constantly refer back to her post-mortem sketches as she covers up the baby's skull with clay.
We have large orbits here on this tiny skull. Now I'm using clay eyeballs rather than prosthetics, and the baby's gonna have his eyes closed anyway. And I just want to line that up to see how much of the eye would be outside of the orbit, and it's about right. I need about 2 millimeters past that. I'm going to be covering the thin layer of clay. Later, show the eyelids.
With the eyeballs in, Greg builds the eyelids.
We're going to grow tissue for the upper and lower lids from the eyeball itself. And I'm just going to quickly draw in a shape for the eye fissure, the eye opening. And once we get it on there and we're happy with where it's at, there's some landmarks that we look to, and that's this little bit of the skull right here called the lacrimal fossa. So your upper eyelid, the ligament, is going to come over the top of that. And on the outside of your socket, you've got what's called the malar tubercle, and that shows us where we want to have it connect on that side.
In order to recreate muscle and tissue thickness, Victoria has meticulously glued tiny markers onto the surface of the baby's skull.
This is actually kind of a combination method that I'm using, really. I'm using tissue depth measurements, which are the thickness of the muscles and the fat, but I'm using a method of filling in the spaces in between, like a jigsaw puzzle, which is the American method of facial reconstruction. This method was developed for police use in that the sculptures can be made a little faster than laying in all of the muscle work first, and you still end up with the facial depths.
Back in Israel, the team's still trying to uncover any evidence that could explain the nature of this baby's death. They've been sifting and re-sifting the soil and remains extracted from the jar baby's tomb.
We could find anything in here. We could find metal in here, couldn't we?
Oh, yes, but we are looking for something specific. After we have a quick look at it,
Yeah.
it goes for the lab for continuous research. The people will study every small stone here.
So this one pot's going to employ a lot of people.
Especially a long time. It will take a few people to work on it for a few years.
Cataloging every soil type and microscopic artifact will take weeks, but it's a systematic process that will filter out even the tiniest piece of evidence. And the tiny skull is offering up hundreds of clues as to how the jar baby looked.
The nose is a pug-like nose because of the small nasal area here that relates to lung size and the body size. I want to have a concave nose for this baby, which is average for a newborn.
It will take many hours to resurrect a 6,000-year-old child. But this baby's face is finally taking shape. Greg employs similar methods in facial reconstruction, but he's using a much different tool set.
We're going to turn our skin off for a second so we can look back at the skull. And again, this is what's nice about this software program, is that I can turn the clay on and off, where once I put clay on the skull, obviously it's on there.
With the skin turned off, Greg tweaks some changes on the newborn's nose.
So we're going to carve a little bit out now. All of these bones of the nose are very important for how we predict that nose. So that's approximately where it's going to be. That's a nasal bone roughly in place.
Every detail in the facial design is determined by the skull's features and Greg's knowledge of where all the little pieces attach. And because Victoria is employing a similar methodology, her physical reconstruction should match with Greg's virtual one. But how will the models compare?
This has been a painstaking reconstruction in that there's not a lot of real estate to work with here. My hand is bigger than that face. So I have to get in here and do all of these little details, creases, skin texture, almost working what to me is a miniature, because I usually do adult skulls.
In the virtual world, Greg can expand his real estate and work area instantly. And when it comes to applying our baby's skin,
We're going to make that 1.5 millimeters.
he doesn't have to worry about big fingers working on a tiny face.
Let's smooth that out a bit. So there's our smooth skin, and we're going to start to tug it now out to the tissue depths that we created earlier. So we'll bring the skin back on. We'll also build in this soft tissue. We can turn our muscles back on.
Greg's on the final stretch. He's provided our 6,000-year-old jar baby its ears, mouth, muscles, neck, and soft tissue systems.
And now that we're seeing this face develop, what we're going to start doing is combining all these pieces together so we can see that this is definitely starting to look more like a baby. It's still a little bit too old, and this has already been tugged out to fit more of the baby's chubby cheeks. So what we're seeing here, all these pieces coming together, and they'll be fine-tuned and tweaked until everything is reconciled with that skull as best we can get it.
After several hours of fine-tuning,
so here we see our final version of this baby. We sent an earlier version to Dr. Herskovitz, who gave a critique. We've incorporated his suggestions into this particular model. If we turn our skull back on with the tissue depths, we can take a look through the skin and see how that relates. Proportionally, everything sort of works out. We can turn the muscles on for peak as well, too, and see what it looks like relating to those muscles. I think that that's a pretty solid-looking 0 to 3-month-old baby.
Greg knows, as a forensic artist, he can only take this model so far. It's time to put this baby into the hands of digital artist Stephen Taylor to add the detailed facial features.
One of the more interesting parts about this process and working on this head in particular has been the fact that there's such an amazing amount of discussion about sacrifice, the child in its lifetime, or the moral implications of working on an infant's head. And I've found that not a lot of people are willing to do it or want to do it. It just seems oddly taboo. And, you know, my role as an artist is to try and bring this child back to life. And so, you know, for me, the creep factor isn't really there because this doesn't have any matter and weight. It's a computer image. You know, it doesn't really exist. It is a reconstruction. It's a speculation. Okay, so I'm gonna take this dense geometry and I'm gonna make it light and pliable.
Stephen applies a polygon mesh to the surface of Greg's model, essentially creating a mold of the baby's facial characteristics.
And so now, you know, this baby has gone from being heavy and dense with information to something that we could run in real time. And I need to make sure that all of these wrinkles and creases that have been put in by the forensic artist are maintained.
Stephen now takes the forensic art beyond reconstructing for identification purposes only and injects a little more life into our baby.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the realm of artistic license and start to add details, creases into the lips, things that are completely subjective. There's no way to know if this child had a mole on his cheek or if he had deep creases under his eyes. These are all pieces of speculation and things that really I'm going to do to try and bring this character to life.
He spends over 20 hours detailing the skin and building the eyes.
And in this process, I'll paint 6 or 7 different layers of skin color that will all run together and interact with the lights inside our final picture taking. So I've been informed that the infant's eyes are going to be sort of growing older, out of the bright blue of a newborn and into their hazel-colored eyes. And so I've set this to paint, and I'm just going to start to rough out this little transformation between the two.
When he starts on the hair, he's almost caught up to Victoria.
Okay, now I'm going to work on the eyelashes.
She's finished the eyes, eyebrows, and skin texturing.
And we want everything to be really smooth and not too textured because it is a baby.
And she adds a final pucker to our baby's lips.
And this little nursing bump will stand out a little bit more once we get finished.
Using the information provided by the anthropologist, Steve adds some ethnic details.
So I'm going to start to make a swaddling cloth and a little bit of a surround for the head here.
He builds everything from scratch, starting with bulky raw material and slowly shaping the cloth.
I'm just going to rough in where I think the folds, where the highs and lows of this fabric are, and then continue to refine.
And Victoria adds the real thing. Swaddling the Canaanite baby for the first time in 6,000 years. Their forensic tool sets couldn't be more different, but the results appear remarkably similar.
So I'm really excited. The infant's coming together nicely. Looks really beautiful, and what I'm going to do now is put the eyebrows and eyelashes in. Okay, now that we have all of the different hair systems in place, let's go back to our viewing angle and take a picture.
The virtual reconstruction is complete. But was this infant the victim of ritual sacrifice? Back in Professor Herscovitz's lab, the meticulous sifting and the excavation of the baby's jar has paid off.
We have floral remains here.
Really?
The archaeologists discover a tiny clue.
What is that?
A grain or something.
Could you pick it up?
It's very, very delicate, and I don't want to destroy it.
So, Shai, what can we learn from that, like, tiny speck of grain?
Well, it's burned.
This could be the last and only clue to our baby's final moments. And further sifting uncovers more material.
Extraordinary.
מאוד מצאנו בתוך הכד הזה.
מצאנו חומר אורגני.
זה החומר האורגני?
כן.
זה הכל חומר אורגני שרוף. יכול להיות שזה זרעים שרופים, גרעינים, שברים של גרעינים, שברים של צמחים.
An examination under the microscope reveals more evidence of fire.
זה נראה לי כמו איזה חלק של פחם, איזה צמח מפוחם, או שביל קטן של עץ שעבר שריפה. וואו, כולו שרוף למעשה.
For thousands of years, the practice of burning grain as sacrifice was common. These could be the last remnants of a grain offering buried with the sacrificial child. Perhaps our Canaanite baby was sacrificed to the gods. Born and dead long before stories like Abraham and Isaac's changed people's thinking. Putting human life as the highest of values.